Jeremy is a young French biomechanics engineer working as a data scientist at INSEP, the French National Institute of Sport and Performance. I love scrambling around longer shortcuts and crafting stuff, whether it be through my sewing machine or a computer. Jeremy likes to understand how and why things work, as well as to divert the basic uses of everyday tools. So today, Jeremy will be talking to us about projecting into the Paris 2024 Games, how data representations can contribute to Olympic gold or not. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, let me say that it feels a bit unreal to me to be there. I feel like I'm going to wake up at some point, like this small indie band no one has ever heard of, and that is playing the main stage at Coachella. So yeah, I'm really happy to be there first. I'm a bit stressed. If there is a live tracking of my cardio, it's quite high at the moment, but hopefully it's going to be fine. So today I'm going to talk about this specific topic, projecting into the Paris 2024 Games. So, and more precisely, how what we do at INSEP can contribute in the end to Olympic gold or not. So, INSEP, what is INSEP? Where it is? It's a 20 hectares like island in the Paris Eastern Lung in the Bois de Vincennes. It's an amazing place where athletes train to perform at their best level at the Olympics. So there is more than 500 athletes training at INSEP within 18 sports. There is also a large number of staffs around them, among employees and coaches and medical staff. And there is also 2 labs to which I belong. And I'm going to also talk about my colleague Brian later. So there is also one Brian that we're going to see along the way, along this presentation. So to get a clear picture of what is INSEP in real life, this is the 500 indoor track for athletics that is especially useful during the winter so that they can train in all conditions. You have the dojo, a special place for me as a judoka, where you can see sometimes in the week the Olympic French champions like Teddy Riner and Clarissa Agbenienou, really the most incredible athletes that are actually training in the dojo, the gymnastic installation, the diving pit with the swimming pools in the background. So all you can ever think of in terms of the best sport installation, it's within INSEP, and I'm finishing with maybe one of the most medal provider for France, an historical sport for us, fencing. So they're training in shorts. So you have to know that. So let's get back to today's subject, the Paris 2024 Games. It's the main goal of everything that we do at INSEP. We don't have to forget that. It's 2 specific months every 4 years. So the Olympics and the Paralympics. And the other part of the title is about projection. So let me do a quick definition before starting. Projections can be the act of projecting something or someone. That is especially true when we talk about a sport like judo, for example. Or another side of it is like, how do you anticipate something like the Olympic Games? How do you prepare for such an event? So an animation that I think it's quite clear to really get into the subject is that when we represent the reality as this cylinder, depending on from where you look at it, it can look really differently. So I think it summarized pretty well what this talk is going to be about, the different aspects, the different angles, staffs, athletes, and even scientists, people like me, have, and how we can bring everyone together. So I've talked about what this talk is going to be about, but not really who are we talking about. And to do that, I think the perfect example is to use marathon data. It's quite a popular sport. The general population is like running a marathon, I would say. You can see that in the Berlin Marathon 2019, more than 30,000 people finished the race. So it's an overview of the general population, but we're not talking about this population, and even not that 50 fastest half of the population. We are talking about something that is a bit on the left, and even really further on the left. So I thank the organization. They have printed the legend of this picture in large letters at the bottom of the screen. Yes, we are talking about outliers when it comes to running. Okay, we are talking about elite athletes, of course. More than the majority of them are below the 0.1% of the general population, and even for the gold medalist is 1 over 10,000. So it's really, really the extreme Q of the distribution we're talking about, not the general population. You have to keep that in mind when I represent the data. So yeah, the world record is right there. And hopefully next year it's going to go down below 2 hours thanks to the carbon shoes. First thing I want to talk about is how we use projections, not especially when using these kind of tools with visualization as the end project, but to show you what's really behind the visible side of a performance. Okay, so Brian, there is a famous joke in French. I don't know if it's the same in other languages, but where is Brian? So Brian is there. Brian is a colleague of mine. I say hi. I think they're watching from abroad. So Brian is there. He's a fast runner and a good damn researcher at the same time. So yeah, he's there. And it's this dot is a race run by Brian. But we have to know that it doesn't stop like with this race. Athletes trains a lot, especially elite athletes. So behind a single point are like a week of training, the week before the competition. We have a month of training, and we have even 6 months of training. So all the dots that you see are training done by the athletes. So when you see this red dot, the only thing that we usually see and therefore know about the performance, there is also all of that to consider, okay? All that for one race. This is the last Paris Marathon, who's been run by Brian with his record, so you can say congrats to Brian. And it doesn't stop to the only running part of the training, okay? You can also have side practices like physical preparation in blue. You can also have like cycling in red, and even recreational activities like alpine skiing you can see at the top. So all of that is important for us to understand what a performance is. And it's quite different to the picture where only the races are displayed. And it gets even more complicated when we know that behind a single performance, there are also like other factors like the environment, the previous injuries, the competition, and so on, that can really affect a single performance on a single day. So how do we deal with that complexity? It goes back to the title of this talk. We project the data into a subset of dimensions to open the discussion with staffs and coaches. So we want to answer questions like, how will my athletes compare to the concurrents in 2 years, for example, or even in the next competition? It is the projection that we use, and one that is quite studied in the sport and science environment is the age and performance relation. It's something that's really important. Age is a key point in the performance. And here is the pole vault data. So let me just introduce you to pole vault. It's like that. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to use the perfect example to show you what pole vault is. It's just, oh, you have the sound. It's even better.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
That is absolutely
Yeah, I find it ridiculous too.
How could we finish any other way than with a world record from the greatest pole vaulter our sport has ever seen?
yeah, this is not part of pole vault. The front flip is not, you're not supposed to do that. I wish I could do this talk with this accent, but no, unfortunately I'm French, so yeah. Let me get back to this projection. If I place on the graphic the performance of Mondo Duplantis, obviously is at the top of the scatter plot, okay? And we can summarize the data by placing a mean, and the standard deviation around the mean is quite light. You cannot really see it on the screen, but that's okay. And since we talk about performance and athletics in particular, and we know that the coaches are really looking for the season best, when we talk about athletics, we have to be specific with every sport. We can place also the season best. So this is the first part to answer the question. And the second part is to focus on past performances when it comes to a specific competition. So this is the same projection, but this time showcasing the performance at specific events like the Olympics. And again, we can, like a cocorico moment, the 2012 Olympics when the French won the Olympic Games. So the same as before, we can summarize the data and place like confidence intervals around the mean, and then place the performances of these athletes on these 2 dimensions. You can see that he's quite on a good track to win the gold medal in Paris next year, but we have also to nuance that point of view, this time using a 3rd dimension. So yes, we switch the view, and then when we arrive to the other dimension, the image is different, but you get the same message, okay? It's really above the concurrence for when it comes to only consider these 2 dimensions. But it's easy to fall into a trap when looking at that, saying like, okay, there's no way I'm going to win the Olympics. But we've seen before that sport is highly uncertain, and so we have to really consider that as with a large amount of humility, because we've seen, like, for example, Simone Biles, last Olympics, she were like this on this track, and unfortunately for her, she didn't make it to the Olympics. So yeah, we have to be careful with this kind of data, but it's really useful for us to open the discussions. Now, I'm going to talk about a really important subject, I think, when it comes to performance. The sport ecosystem is designed and run by men and for men, unfortunately. And sometimes the taboos that are linked to, for example, women performances and the women specificities are really hard to break, and I think with a little help of data visualization, we can really change that. So how to adjust the training load, for example, to women specificities. This is the same like Christmas tree figure that you saw before, but using this time another kind of data for Emma and for Mary. It's not useful, of course, display like that, because it doesn't summarize the data well. But once you transform this projection into a different way of seeing it, you can see clearly that it's kind of different between Mary on the left and Emma on the right. What we represent is the hormonal cycles of the athletes, a factor that has never been really studied among elite athletes, and it's now taken into account more and more thanks to the amazing project like that. And you can see that on the left, Marie is taking a pill, a contraceptive pill, so it's really regular. The pattern is regular. And on the right, it's a natural cycle, so you can see the variation. You can do that for 2 athletes, but you can do that also for a whole squad. And this has a huge impact when it comes to discuss with your athletes, especially when you're a male coach. You see that your athletes are really unique, and you have to consider them individually to adapt the training based on their specificities. So yeah, collecting more and more data, they're able to to present some recommendation to adapt the training. So, for example, it's a particular example. Between in the follicular phase, you can increase training intensity when no confrontation. For example, this is the kind of stuff that is really helpful and increase a lot the confidence the athletes have within their own skin. So it's really important, and data visualization is really important to that. So I've talked about the Olympics, women's specificities, but not what is going to happen to the second half of the next summer, the Paralympics. Don't forget them, they're amazing. And I think projection is also a wonderful tool for equity and accessibility when it comes to representing the data. It's a wonderful tool. So how we can take them into account when representing the performances. So when I talk about Paralympics, I have to explain you the specificities of Paralympics. For those of you that don't know, the athletes are grouped into categories based on their impairment and the degree of their impairment. So I've displayed 5 of them, but there are hundreds and hundreds of classifications that are set to make the competition more equitable. I don't know if it's a word in English, but yeah, you get it. I'm going to focus on the T64 just for you to understand. T is for track, so we're talking about athletics as opposed to F for field. So T is the name for the track athletes. 64 is for athletes with absence of one leg below the knee, if the picture wasn't clear enough. And we're going to use the same projection as before for the woman 100-meter T64. So this is T64, but what's really interesting is that if you see really what's behind the T64 category, despite the name, so the name in itself is quite misleading, there is also the T62 and the T44. So for the main events, like the Olympics, category are even grouped together to gather more people competing at the same time, and they have only one medal for this regroupment, okay? And this is quite important when you talk with athletes, because they have to know who they are competing with, okay? The T62 athletes have prostheses, and so they're usually faster than the other two. And so, yeah, we have to know who you're fighting with, basically. And this is a way to do so. For those of you that wonder why there was no T62 and T44 before 2018, it's just because they reclassify the athletes and they create new classification across time. So yeah, this is why. Now, accessibility. Let me change the category, and we're talking about T11 now. If I tell you that there is something really wrong about this, can you spot what is wrong? No, not yet. I'm going to change the number of points that I'm going to display to that. And can you spot what I'm heading to? Yeah, T11 athletes don't see. So what's the use of data visualization when you speak with athletes that don't even see what you're presenting them? So I think there is a real work to do to change even the name of the field. I'm not saying we're going to change the name of the field, but I think we have to change the way we look at data, to change from visualizing only to maybe represent the data, or something more broad to include more people into our work. So yeah, this is really important, and yeah, Olympics and Paralympics goes together, so we have to take that into account. Now I'm going to talk about a last project before concluding, and it's a project that's really close to my affinities as a biomechanical engineer. And I'm glad that Lionel at the front is the head of the project, so feel free to ask him questions beforehand. I'm not the pro at answering technicalities, but he is. So yeah, say hi, Lionel. So what it is about? It's a project that is done by INRIA together with INSEP, and it's about using images and video to study the athletes in an ecological situation, meaning without interfering with the way they do their sport. Okay? We used to collect data with captors and something like that, and we don't want that, or we want to reduce the effect that you have as a researcher on the athlete you study. And I think this picture really summarized the project really well, since you have the cameras at the bottom, and on the top right you see Sirius Lionel doing research. Yes, he is on the picture, so he's kind of hidden in the black part of the room, and I think it's kind of what is this about. So how does this work? It's a markerless technology, as I said, so there is no markers. They only collect the video flux that is from a single camera, and then they're able to spot where the athletes and where the key points in the body are using machine learning and computer vision techniques. So it's quite impressive. It's a fixed image, but I think when it comes to animated, it's super, I find it super cool. So even when the athletes are in front of each other, you can still like recognize which one is which one. And in green, you have the referee if you're wondering why there is a third person in the ring. So yeah, this is impressive. And when you transform that into a visualization, you can project also this data into the ring plane and have some spatial information about who's occupying which part of the ring. And this is really useful when you have to know who's dominating, basically, the game. So it can be done for one round or one fight, and also with many boxing fights. So it's fully automatized, and as we say, it's non-invasive. So it can be done without our many athletes and without even them noticing that we are studying them. So to conclude, I still want to talk about one or two topics. I think I have a bit more time. We have to escape the dangers of monitoring work. So I'm going to explain what I'm meaning about that. It's easy to think about the athletes as people that are living their dream and like doing what they love, and yeah, it's a part of what they do, but what they do is also a job, you know. So when they work, we monitor them a lot, and by a lot I say a lot. And would it be okay if we step aside for a minute to do the same kind of performance optimization if we were to look at like a cashier, for example, or someone with another kind of job? So sometimes we have to make sure that it's okay for the athletes to be represented this way, and I think sometimes the best visualization we can do to help athletes for them to feel confident is actually the one that we don't do. So no visualization is maybe sometimes the best visualization. So maybe it's the case for one or two of you also. And sport is my day passion, but my night passion is live music, and I'm gonna finish my talk with a quote by the great Rick Rubin. I don't know if you know him, but he's like the godfather of music producing. And he's saying a really meaningful sentence for me: no matter what tools you use to create, the true instrument is you. So maybe the best visualization you can do is the one you're gonna do in 2 minutes in the side of the field on the slate, and not the one you spend like 10 hours, 15 hours working on in your fancy tools. So you have to stay close to who are you talking to and what is the main and the time frame to do the visualization as well, to be the most impactful you can be. So that's it for me. Hopefully we see some of you next year in Paris. You're really welcome. If you want to visit INSEP, just say hi to me. I just want to say that I only live in this 3D dimension. I don't really exist on social media. So thanks for the Outlier committee to welcome someone that is not really everywhere on the web talking. So yeah, this is my email, the only way you can connect with me. So, and talk to me, obviously. So that's it. And if you have questions, I'm there.
Having worked with, or indirectly worked with footballers, the extent to which they engage with data analysis, presentations of data, varies. Some are quite arrogant and don't want to engage with data that tells them they're not as good as they think they are. Others are really into it, logical. Others are more about feeling. To what extent do you have to put in effort to bring up the sort of data literacy of the athletes and their engagement levels and teach them how to read charts and draw conclusions from these things that you're producing?
Yeah, tough question, the first one. First of all, I want to say that data visualization is maybe 1% of what we're doing in terms of research. And it's a controversy because it's the only thing that the end user sees, and we spend so much, so little time, to do that. But at the same time, it's really useful. I think it depends a lot on the federation or the actors you're talking about. Some federations are quite advanced in the data literacy. For example, cycling, they're absolutely great at using data to optimize performances. So in general, I would say that we have to put a lot of work to convince people that it's useful first, and that is not a black and white picture. It is only a way for them to have more info, and it's not supposed to replace the coach. And that's it. I think it's the main topic we have to discuss with them, that we are here to help, basically.
All right, let's take one additional question. Yes, in the center.
I have two questions. One is, sorry. Okay, one question related to what Andy was asking. How did you control for the emotional reaction? Because visualizations in general are some people's or other people's data that we present to a different audience, but this one is themselves, right? They are seeing themselves in a chart. Yeah. They might think, oh, this is lost or being overconfident. Is there a moment where you choose, well, we are not going to show you this anymore because it's actually impacting your behavior, not behavior, but how your performance?
Basically, what we do, what we always do, is to ask first the coaches, would it be okay to present something to the athletes? And sometimes the answer is, okay, I'm gonna keep that for me. I'm not gonna show that to the athlete. He's not like ready for it, or it's not like I'm not saying it's useful for him at the moment. So I think it doesn't always reach the athlete himself, and it's important for us to have some kind of barrier to make sure that we only do good to the athletes. So I think it stops quite a lot before the athletes. So it's kind of safe for everyone, and yeah.
It's such an interesting kind of place to end, I think, on who needs access to what information, and then how do we respond to it, from the emotional piece over to other ways in which it might impact performance, that we think about the ways in which, whether it's sports data or other data about ourselves, or data even in a workplace.
Yeah. For example, the hormonal cycle data, they're collected with the athletes. They have to fill out a questionnaire every morning about several questions. So obviously the data has to come back to the athletes because he puts effort into it. Mm. So this is important to give and receive at the same time. But when it comes to data that are not coming directly from the athletes, I think we can be a bit more cautious about the
Yeah.
interpretation.
What's interesting is thinking about those feedback loops for sure. Well, this has been a fantastic way to wrap up our morning of day 2. Huge round of applause for Jeremy.